Welcome back and Happy New Year's, everyone. We are returning to the MMA Sucka Podcast. I am Tim Wheaton, joined as always by the one and only Frazer Krohn. Frazer, how you doing today, man?
I'm glad to be back in a way, but in the same sentence, 2023 already. We're 10 days in. It's not looking good for MMA, guys. It's not looking good for MMA.
It
As
is,
for me and
yeah.
Tim, as content creators and writers and journalists in the sphere, as it were, it's a good year for us. We've got plenty to write about. There's not going to be any writer block already this year, but from the outsider point of view, it's been a bit dicey to say the least.
Yeah, one of the things I think that continuously comes up is when I speak to fighters, whether they're new in the industry or old. Like I asked this to from like Frank Shamrock to I don't know someone new, or like Terrence McKinney. Of like MMA is filled with weird people, and everyone's always like, "Yeah, that's that's a fact." MMA is filled with eccentric characters and just an odd bunch of people. And I feel like in the last 10 days, what do we? Yeah, 10 days of 2023, you see it all on display.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't echo that more. And not only is it already full of weird people, but then we got the Jake Paul news, who's entering the MMA sphere. Another
That might
weird
that's
guy.
actually that's a like a bright spot for the year. In all honesty, that's
For
great.
sure. We'll go on to, I think, this podcast is going to be a little bit of kind of a review of what's been going on for the,
Yeah,
I mean, it's 10 days. It's 10 days and we've already got multiple talking points. We've got Dana White situation to talk about. We've got Victoria Lee, and unfortunately, we'll touch briefly on that because not an awful lot of news is, we were talking off air. Not an awful lot of news has come out about that. We got the Instagram post from Angela Lee, and personally, I read the report on I can't remember, it was a foreign newspaper, but there's not an awful lot of information about it. So we don't want to pass comment on it. We can, of course, pass comment on what a great loss it is to the sport. A phenomenal talent. I think she's 3-0, already competing in one. She's going on the same trajectory as her sister and her brother. We're looking at another world champion, but we don't want to pass comment too much because we don't want to speak out of turn. And then we've got this weekend's fight with the UFC, which has already seen a shake up last night. I mean,
middleweight sucks.
UFC just MMA, man. In 2023 MMA, get me back to 2022 when we're just having fight after fight, man. It's just like it's crazy.
You know what's funny? So I wrote. Do you remember when Power Slap League not that long ago was? So everything on Twitter was like, "Oh, Power Slap League has been bumped from TBS scheduling," and then it came out like a few hours later, like, "Oh, it's just been moved a week back" or something like that. But I wrote an article in that time, just in between those 2 points, being like, "Hey, Power Slap League has been bumped from TBS." It went out and got published. The next day, the UFC responded to the article officially. This was on another website, but they responded to this and said, update the article because it hasn't been canceled as per your article. It has been delayed a week. So we had to go in and update the article and then republish it. However, here's the thing of all the stuff that we've said about the UFC, the only time they've ever reached out is on Dana White's Power Slap League. And this should show you, as we were talking about in the 2 episodes ago, that is what the UFC actually cares about. If you're pissing off Dana White, that's when you care. If you've been saying, hey, your fighters are trash and they're crappy people and they're not good for this entire world, who cares?
Exactly.
Dana White might be in trouble. Now the actual UFC is coming at you. That is their priority. And the entire Power Slap League, stupid. Dana White hitting his wife. I mean, domestic violence is not a joke. It's not a joking matter in any way. And there's been absolute garbage responses from ESPN, the UFC, Endeavor, Dana White, his wife. I mean, Brian Campbell talked about it on air. He was maybe the best response of, it doesn't matter what all these people are going to do. Does he get fired? Who cares? What is Dana going to do, right? Frazer, please go ahead.
No, exactly. I completely agree. And I did after I listen to Morning Combat every week, and after you mentioned about Brian Campbell last week, I specifically when I wasn't doing anything else, I just was in the gym listening to that so I could just concentrate on what he was saying. And him and Luke Thomas both spoke really well on it. Ariel absolutely buried Dana White, and rightfully so. And nobody, MMA fighting, MMA junkie, ESPN, none of these guys are addressing the issue because they're all scared, in my opinion, of losing their credentials.
Yes.
Or getting banned from the next 3 events, for example.
Yep.
These guys are not writing articles about the fact that Dana White has got a history of or not, okay, maybe not domestic violence, but you know, I think it was Corey Anderson that said on Twitter, you know, if you think that the first time that Dana White has hit his wife just happened to be on camera, you're a fool. And you know, unfortunately, you know, I don't want to agree with Corey Anderson because that's not a nice thing to agree with him on.
No, yeah.
But I agree with him. You know, it's a difficult. You know, by no means are we saying that it's a fact, but it seems a little bit suspect that the first time, like we say, was caught on camera. And this Dana White is a guy that's never told no. No one ever tells him no. You can't make this. You can't do that. You can't do this. Power slap. One of the biggest issues with boxing, one of the biggest issues with MMA is CTE.
Yep.
But with boxing, you can go to the body. You have the big gloves. Blah 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 blah. With MMA, you know, it's not solely on. You know, arguably, well, I wouldn't even say arguably. MMA is safer than boxing because you mix it up. You go to the legs. You grapple. You take down. You attack the body a lot more. There's less direct head trauma. Power slap is direct head trauma. There's no two ways about it. There's no, oh, but you can, you know, this technique and that. No, it's direct head trauma.
Yeah.
Where there's no defense. You know, these guys have got to stand with their hands behind their backs. It's ridiculous. And, you know, Dana White has got a history of giving domestic abusers work. You know, I wrote an article and, you know, just the title of it, Dana White accentuates the domestic abuse issue within MMA because he's giving these guys work time and again. And it's not like, you know, John Jones, you know, it's all very right to say, oh, yeah, but the charges were dropped. Well, yeah, but these guys were caught doing it and the victims don't want to press charges, which is a massive issue in domestic abuse itself, in the wider domestic abuse issue, because they're scared of their attacker. You know, we can go into the laws of it, but that's, you know, that's an obvious one. You know, Mike Perry, ex-wife Danielle Nicholson came out and said, you know, this, that. And she even said, I know that my words are not going to have an impact on his career. She knew from a victim perspective that regardless of what she says, Dana White isn't going to do shit to Mike Perry. Yes, he was cut from the UFC, not as a result of this, as a result of being not a very good fighter. I'll say it. You know, Thiago Silva, Abel Trujillo, Travis Brown, Priscilla Cachoeira, and, you know, Anthony Rumble Johnson. I personally didn't include him in the article because, you know, I don't want to sort of almost badmouth someone in you know, after their passing, but you know, the fact remains. But then in other situations, they do act right. Luis Pena and Michael Graves, for example, both were cut from the UFC after domestic violence issues in their personal life. But then with Greg Hardy, a known domestic abuser, put him on the same card as Rachel Ostovich, a woman who had her orbital broken in a domestic abuse issue.
Yep.
It's just tone deaf from the UFC and Dana White. You know, he at the end of the day, you know, the matchmakers can come and say, oh, I want Greg Hardy to be on the first ESPN card. He's a big name. We know him from the NFL season, but we also want Paige Van Zandt to be on the card against Rachel Ostovich. That's fine. But Dana White has the final say on it. It's fine to go and maybe these guys that are matchmaking and making up the cards don't know the backstory of Rachel Ostovich. Don't know. I mean, it's impossible almost to not know the backstory of Greg Hardy within the UFC circles. But maybe they don't know the backstory of Rachel Ostovich. But Dana White does. Somebody at the UFC knows that backstory because we know that backstory. So stop it before it gets there. You know, it's just. And then we've got people coming out, you know, Derek Brunson saying, you know, he admitted he was wrong. Like, you know, men shouldn't hit women. Do I feel this is a reflection of who Dana is? No. Dana's been a competent second chance component. But then he wears a T-shirt saying, I beat up domestic abusers. So he changed his beliefs when it's his boss. And Sean O'Malley saying, yeah, this was the worst one for me. I feel bad for Dana. His wife slapped him. That's rude, and it deserves a slapping back. Even if he was joking. This isn't a joking matter that you've been caught on camera abusing your wife. You know, straight up. It's for me, it's a difficult issue to talk on because, you know, we just want to be talking about fun fights. Calvin Gastelum pulls out. Sean Strickland headlining back-to-back events. Has that ever happened before? I'm not sure. Blah blah blah. But then something like this happens, and you have to talk about it. It's impossible not to.
Yeah, no, and it sucks. It sucks to talk about it, and it's a sad thing that it's so ubiquitous. We didn't even cover the absolute insane Phil Baroni situation, which but there's nothing I can add to it. It's such an odd and sad situation. But with the Dana and Anna, both of them, they had their TMZ quotes ready. Like TMZ ran the article. A few minutes later, they had the rest of it ready to go. It was a weird thing of both of them being like, this is the first time it's ever happened. And both of them mentioned it. It's very much Shakespearean of he who doth protest too much. Of like, okay, both of you just admitted, like, this is no one I even asked.
No,
like,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. They're almost incriminating themselves with that. It's the whole, when you don't give anything away about a crime that you've committed, but then you accidentally, say, well, when she went missing or something, oh, well, we haven't mentioned that it's a girl. We just mentioned, for example, that's a daft analogy. But no, I completely agree. It's the first time it ever happened.
No one asked.
Irrelevant if it's the first time or if it's the 10th time. Nobody asked. So now we're questioning. Well, we wouldn't have questioned whether it was the first time. We just assumed that it was the first time because it's the first time that we as the public has ever seen it. Yeah. But now you're saying that it's the first time. Now I'm beginning to think it's definitely not the first time. So
both of you came out and said that in your opening statement. Yeah, it's just a suspicious thing. But yeah, Power Slap League. I think it'll go to air. It's dead in the water. I mean, you can't. It's just Dana White slaps his wife. Dana White's Power Slap League. But as far as I know, it's dead in the water. If you've read comments on Instagram or Twitter, I know that's not indicative, but it's not growing. It got a lukewarm welcome in the beginning, and it just hasn't picked up any steam at all. And one thing I think that people aren't talking about, while yes, look, fight sport is violent. In all honesty, we like to cover it like it's martial arts. In reality, I think we like the violence. We're a little bit sickos like that. Power Slap League sucks. It's just bottom of the barrel. However, one thing that I will also mention on this, and that the UFC may not, I think the UFC should be taking note of this, is it might actually be devaluing something that we've been talking about in the UFC for decades, is that everyone wants to co-promote with the UFC, from M1 to Strikeforce wanted to co-promote and all that stuff. And they always said, no, we'd never co-promote. Power Slap League is co-promoted by the UFC, and it's not picking up any steam. Maybe co-promoting with the UFC is not as valuable as we think it is. Maybe it's just those three letters don't have power. Yeah, I forget the other point I was going to make there. But anyway, Fraser, what do you think?
Go ahead there. No, I completely agree. We've seen Bellator and Rising. We didn't cover it because we were on a sort of festive break, but Bellator and Rising, that card, although the fights didn't quite, I think all of them went to decision. The sort of 5 fights that we had, Bellator versus Rising, and obviously Bellator went 5-0. But also you've got to consider the fighters that you're putting in there: AJ McCree, Pitbull, Archuleta, Horiguchi, and I can't remember the last guy. But at the end of the day, these are the elite of Bellator. These just aren't your Bellator sort of everyday guys. And that was a really good co-promoted event. Now I completely agree that the 3 letters UFC,
a lot of value.
There's a lot of value, but I completely agree with, I hate to say this, but I completely agree with Jake Paul that fighters are going to be more interested in going to the PFL.
Yeah.
This is a business. It's a fight business, There are fighters in the PFL that could legitimately give fighters in the UFC, champions in the UFC, a run for their money, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And we're no longer, tone deaf to MMA is UFC. UFC is MMA. We've got Bellator, we've got One, we've got the PFL, we've got, Rising, we've got in lower level sort of Cage Warriors, KSW, these sort of more local promotions, LFA. It's important to realize now that Jake Paul has maybe taken the first steps into equaling out the gap between the UFC and MMA. Now, Jake Paul is always going to be, the UFC is always going to be the premier, the best, the promotion that fighters are going to want to go to. With the greatest respect to Bellator, no one grows up saying, I want to be a Bellator fighter. Everyone says, I want to get to the UFC, regardless of who you speak to.
Absolutely.
Jake Paul's making those steps with his, super fight sort of league thing, whatever, in PFL.
Definitely an uphill battle. Like rich people have done this in the past and it hasn't really worked out. Like Showtime's completely just sponsored like Elite XC and Strikeforce didn't work out. Affliction had billionaires backing it and they still just never made money. It's an uphill battle. But Jake Paul and the PFL, one of the rumors that came out was Bellator may be for sale. And one thing that PFL does consistently is they can raise money from investors. I don't think PFL actually makes money, but they raise money from investors skillfully. I think PFL might actually be in the market to buy Bellator at some point in the future. And with the Jake Paul news, with my random rumor that there's no evidence of, PFL is working into a number 2 spot, and I hope that they are competitive because a dual market is better for the viewers, is better for the media, it's better for us, it's better for everybody involved, and it's much better for the fighters.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd argue, you know, we could go onto social media. PFL fighters, by name value alone, are bigger than Bellator fighters.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, you got AJ McKee, Pitbull, and Cyborg, maybe Fedor, but you know, does the casual even know Fedor these days?
We all know he's no. I don't think we're fooling people. I don't think Bellator. No one's being fooled by exactly. Fedor's been out of his prime for his entire Bellator and Strikeforce career.
Exactly, but then you go over to the PFL. You've got Jake Paul, you've got Brendan Loughnane, you've got Kayla Harrison, you've got, you know, these are big names because they sell themselves well, because the promotion knows how to promote them. You know, this super fight division, it says, you know, we've got an article up on the site from Andrew. At least 50% of the pay-per-view revenue will go to the fighters. 50%.
Revenue, not profit. Revenue. Exactly. That's great. That's like that's an actual sport, like the big 4 stick and ball sports in the US, or you know anything like that. Any real sports out there. That's how it's run. That is how real sports are run. Yeah.
You know, and the fact that Jake Paul and Dana have already got this, you know, slight rivalry of sorts, I think just makes the PFL signing of Jake Paul so much better, and you know, it pushes it to that next level now, because the PFL was definitely, you know, it was, in my opinion, it was the number 2 promotion last year. UFC's for the next 10 or 15 years, I think, is probably going to be number 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the PFL, with the stars they had coming through, with the way, you know, they came into the European market, they've announced their Challenger Series. They've overtaken Bellator for me because, you know, we spoke on it. Bellator is just not an entertaining prospect anymore, unfortunately.
Well, and someone did say, I think it was actually an Instagram comment. I've clearly been doing nothing, but in an Instagram comment. But one of the problems that Bellator has had is that they actually haven't separated themselves in any meaningful product, even to the point of like Strikeforce had a clear difference to the UFC in its name values, who it was, how it was presented. Anything else like Ryzen and One, PFL, they all have different packages. Bellator just doesn't have anything different that makes it separate in the fans' eye. And it's been running for a long time as a number 2. And even for insiders like us, it doesn't stick out. But yeah, anyway, go ahead, please.
No, exactly. No, and I think their sort of USP, as it were, is, you know, we are willing to co-promote, or we are willing to let our fighters fight elsewhere. You know, with Dylan Dennis was obviously supposed to be facing KSI this weekend.
That's funny.
That's not happening, but you know, the least said about that, the better, because you know he's a stain on the sport, and I think
it wasn't even an injury. The guy couldn't make weight to make $1 million. This is embarrassing.
It's ridiculous, and you know, I put myself through, for my so-called love of the sport, his interview with Ariel.
I loved it. It was watching a car crash. It was a freak show. I loved the interview.
Ariel Helwani, a guy that, you know, by his own admission, doesn't train, isn't really, you know, interested in ever fighting. Back-to-back weeks, buried Dylan Dennis, live to his face, buried Dana White. Ariel Helwani has had a good start to the year, and ends to 2022. So, but you know, like going back to the original point, you know, Bellator's almost USP is co-promoting events with like a Ryzen, you know, allowing their fighters like Cyborg to go and have the boxing match. Obviously Dylan Dennis to go and have this influencer boxing match, letting Valerie Loreda go to the WWE.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, that's not enough to be a USP in the market where the UFC is putting on the best fights. PFL is putting on their $1 million tournaments. One is having these crazy, mixed rules MMA, Muay Thai fights, and they're mixing in with kickboxing and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, KSW is borderline a freak show with Pujanowski just.
KSW is selling out
doing what it is.
stadiums in
Exactly.
Poland. Like, they are making a mark. All these companies, what we're saying is they're making a difference and they're making a clear product. Bellator.
If Bellator are clever, they'd go to Dublin every week, because that's the only show, in my opinion, that probably sells out and has a banging crowd every time Bellator. But that's because 90% of the Bellator fighters are John Kavanagh's guys.
Yeah,
or have been at some point John Kavanagh's guys. There's, like we're saying, there's no USP to Bellator, unfortunately, and that's why, I wrote an article on outlandish predictions. I do it every year, and I struggled to find anything to write about Bellator. If I wanted to write a whole article on the UFC, easy. If I wanted to write a whole article on PFL, easy. I'd probably struggle a little bit more with one championship, but I'm sure with your help we could get 10 predictions out.
No problem.
I would struggle, and I did struggle to write anything about Bellator. I think off the top of my head, it's not published yet. It'll probably be going out later this week. Off the top of my head, I think the only sort of Bellator one I included was about Cyborg fighting Kayla Harrison.
And that's not even
that's not exclusively Bellator.
Thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exclusively Bellator. So, I just don't have a good, the fights that are booked. We've got Bader and Fedor and Ruffian Stotts and Patchy Mix.
I like Fedor. I like Fedor. I actually own one of his T-shirts from the Strikeforce days, and this is.
I don't want to see it though. I like him. I don't want to see it.
That's
it's
right.
Like Shogun making his last appearance in Brazil against.
But Shogun's fighting a bum.
Exactly. But I don't want to see. This is what I'm saying. That I don't want to see Shogun get knocked out.
Yeah.
So that's why we're putting him up against who we're putting him up against. Fedor. I don't want to see him get knocked out by Ryan Bader. He just beat Timothy Johnson, who just
in Moscow.
Exactly. Who just went in there and just swung for a bit and thought they could get the better of Fedor, but you didn't. So, Bellator just need to this year just do better. I think they've got. Is it the lightweight tournament they've announced with Usman Nurmagomedov and AJ McKee, which is exciting.
Here's one of the issues that I think our criticism of Bellator actually comes from a place of passion for MMA, because I think we've been betrayed so much by them. Their heavyweight tournament ended in crotch shots. Their welterweight tournament ended with MVP and Paul Daly grappling and crotch shots. Like, I think we watched a lot of Bellator to eventually turn on them, to like now with the lightweight tournament, I'm just like, yeah, it's going to be okay. And I want to be excited. I have been excited. Yeah,
for sure. Let's not forget the light heavyweight tournament ended in a no contest with the headbutt, and then it had to be replayed.
That's right too. Oh my God, you're right.
I'm putting all my eggs in the Ruffian Stotts Patchy Mix. Just. I don't care who wins. I don't care how they win, as long as it's not controversial and as long as it goes, at least 10 seconds. Because we saw the crotch shot with Matt Mitrione.
Yeah.
I cannot with Bellator, and this is not a Bellator problem. It is, but it's not a Bellator fault. They can't help these things. But
it is weird that it's so consistent, though.
But for goodness' sake, there's an article waiting to happen there that I might look into. Why the unfortunate ending to Bellator's most recent? Because the tournament structure, it's a good logical structure. Get your 8 best guys, have 2 or 4 guys, sat just on the outside of that to fill in for injuries, to fill in for this, to fill in for that. But the thing that's different between Bellator tournaments and PFL tournaments, so PFL tournaments are done April to November. Bellator tournaments, so and so suffered an injury, so we're gonna postpone that fight for another 4 months. Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, that's the fight to make, but at the same time, let's be honest here. That's what makes the PFL so exciting. Brendan Loughnane competed in August on the same card as the guy that he's gonna face in the finals. They both competed in November. Kayla Harrison competed in August against the same girl and then they compete in November. These guys don't get a long rest, and it's why I've seen a lot of people. We mentioned Brendan Loughnane for our male fighter of the year because he's had 4 fights, 4 victories, and won $1 million. I couldn't tell you when the beginning of the Bellator bantamweight tournament was, and I can't tell you when it's going to finish either because we know who's in the finals, but it hasn't been. I don't think it's been announced yet.
I was going to say the same thing. Like, that was so exciting when it was announced, and the first round was pretty great. I actually don't know if it had finished or by now or not. I don't know.
No, exactly. So I believe that the Patchy Mix's first. So his first fight was in April of 2022 against Horiguchi. He's yet to be. We know that he's fighting Ruffian Stotts. That's yet to be announced.
Okay.
Why not? These guys are both. What are we waiting for? Patchy Mix hasn't fought since the beginning of December. Stotts obviously had that controversial. Well, I mean, it wasn't a controversial, but it was controversially scored against Sabatello on the same night. So book these guys. I can't understand why they haven't booked them. It's not like Bellator have got such a back-to-back schedule where they can barely fit these guys in. This is, probably the third or fourth biggest fight you can make in Bellator at the moment because it's the end of the bantamweight tournament. But even with the bantamweight tournament, you've still got the champion who never lost the belt. Yeah, Sergio Pettis sat out, due to injury. He's going to be sat out for at least 18 months, and it just. I don't know. For me, it's just not. Still, even now, is not catching fire, and it should. We know the two. Again, we know the two best Bellator bantamweights. Well, that's not the case because you've still got Sergio Pettis sat out. But on paper, in theory, you've got the two best Bellator bantamweights matched up, ready to go, and yet we don't know when they're going to be fighting. I mean, it's. Bellator, man. It's a shame because it's almost not their fault because, like I said, you can't help an injury to Sergio Pettis. You can't help these people pulling out, but even the UFC isn't exactly showering themselves in glory. The two best UFC have always put themselves the best versus the best. Now the first two pay-per-views that we've got are Glover Teixeira and Jamala Hill.
That's not their fault. It's it could be a better fight.
He don't book fights on the night of other fights, and he did that.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
I don't for a second believe that all the contracts were written up in the half an hour from the draw to the press conference. That didn't happen. They were maybe planning something along those lines.
The belt wants Jiri. Like, no, just hang up the belt, put it on the shelf because the belt doesn't want anybody else. It's Jiri. That's the champion.
Exactly. And luckily, we've seen on social media, as we say, Bellator gonna Bellator, Jiri gonna Jiri. We've seen him already up in the mountains. He's had his surgery. I think it was yesterday. I don't know if the post was from yesterday, but I saw it yesterday. First run back in the mountains, bro.
Take it easy, bro.
Yeah, please sit on it for 2 more weeks.
Every athlete, because there's people are so strong from any sport. If you've been in sports since you were 6 years old, you're insanely strong and insanely athletic. Doctor says you need a year. Every athlete here is, I'll take 6 months. Jiri is an insane man who's taken 2 months now, and he's like, I'm back in the gym, hitting pads, brother, sit down. Rest your shoulder.
Yeah, just ease off it, man, because we want to see you compete for the 205-pound title. Just Absolutely. Ease off it, man, because it's, as you're sort of alluding to, as we're alluding to, Jamala Hill versus Glover Teixeira, unfortunately, they're not the two best light heavyweights on the planet. Jiri Prochazka
What? Oh yeah, Jiri.
Jiri Prochazka is the best light heavyweight on the planet because he never lost a belt.
Yeah.
Glover Teixeira could very well be the best light heavyweight on the planet because he lost the belt to Jiri Prochazka. You know,
Yep.
in an extremely close fight where if he didn't jump for that guillotine, he's probably winning the fight. Jamala Hill, I think, still should have had a fight against a real top guy because if you look at his last win, the guy's already signed for the PFL. He's no longer in the UFC, Thiago Santos. So it gets a bit dicey when you break it down like that. With that being said, I'm excited for the fight, but
yes,
it's unfortunately we're ending the last pay-per-view card of the year. The main event was as a result of a pullout of course Jiri and Glover, and we're already starting the 2023. Literally last night on today, Tuesday, on the Monday of fight week, it breaks that Calvin Gastelum is out of the fight and Sean Strickland has to step in. It's just MMA in 2023, man.
My first reaction was just like, middleweight is a mess. This is so silly. This is also very emblematic of middleweight as a whole. However, did we maybe get a better fight out of it? Like, Kelvin Gastelum is riding his high from when he knocked out Michael Bisping 18 years ago, however long ago that was. But and he's riding high from his war against Israel Adesanya. In actuality, we may have since then he hasn't done a ton. We might have got a better fight out of this now that I'm kind of reflective on it. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Stop me when I'm wrong.
I don't think any Sean Strickland fight is going to be good ever. Apart from the one where he got knocked out against Pereira, unfortunately. If you look at his, he hasn't finished a fight since 2020. He's gone decision against Jotko, decision against Uriah Hall, decision against Jack Manson, lost the decision against Jared Cannonier, the last fight of last year.
Yeah.
And now he's coming in on short notice. He's always got a gas tank, but, I'm just looking down Calvin Gastelum's pullout record. He hasn't fought. Why is Calvin Gastelum still in the UFC? Like you say, he's riding off these wins. He obviously lost to Adesanya in April of 2019 in the absolute fight of the year contender. I think I even might have won fight of the year. I thought that was one of the best fights I've ever seen.
Yes.
Then he lost to Darren Till. He got heel hooked by Jack Manson. He beat Ian Heinisch, who I don't think is in the UFC anymore. No. He then he then lost to Robert Whittaker, lost to Jared Cannonier.
Yeah.
He then had a fight scheduled against Imanov in April of last year. He didn't pull out of that one. It was a visa issue on Imanov's side. But then he was supposed to be fighting Dricus du Plessis on that fight. He then pulled out. Gastelum pulled out. Gastelum's pulled out of this one. So you're looking at, it's a pretty bad mouth injury that he had, knocked. But
that looked bad. The picture was terrible, wasn't it?
What is he doing on fight week where he's knocking teeth out to that extent? I mean, what are you doing? Like, I just don't know what he's doing where he gets into a situation where you're knocking your teeth out, like as badly as it, I can understand, I'm feeling a little bit stiff on fight week. And we know that guys on fight week are, they you have to keep sharp. You have to hit pads. You have to do a little bit of touch sparring.
Mm-hmm.
How has he knocked unless it's a freak injury, how has he knocked his sort of one of his front teeth completely out by the looks of it? I mean, I just don't. But, going back to your original point, I know I've just ranted on his career. I think we get a better fight. I don't.
He might actually, yeah.
Calvin Gastelum is not a middleweight. He's a lazy welterweight who, doesn't. Yeah, he never looks. He's always going to look the smaller guy at middleweight. And I think this is as good a fight, I think, as the Gastelum fight, if not a little bit better. I hope Sean Strickland doesn't. I'm not mentally prepared for a Sean Strickland fight week and him on the mic. I'm glad this is going on at 205 pounds rather than 185 because we don't need to see guys, Sean Strickland especially, try and kill himself to get down to the weight, especially due to the fact that he's stepping in on short notice. Yeah. And I'm not sure if anyone's ever headlined back-to-back events. Actually, headlined back-to-back events. I saw someone on Twitter say Kevin Holland, but he headlined back-to-back fight nights, but it was UFC 260 in the middle of those. So it's not It's not back-to-back events, so this might be, we might be making history. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone that's headlined. We've had Lupi Godinez and we've had Hamzat Chimaev compete on multiple cards, week after week, but these aren't headliners. Sean Strickland's headlined 2 events now in not in 2 weeks, but 2 events in, as many UFC events. He's it's an impressive feat.
I think even when even going back to the older era, I was going to say just in the modern era, but I think even going back to the Royce Gracie era, I don't think there was a lot of headlining back to back, even when things were 3 months apart. It's a huge rarity, but Sean Strickland would be the guy just due to his fight style and how safe he is able to fight. And of course, it's not a mark against him. That is part of the sport, is hit and not get hit, and he does that. And fans don't like it because he is kind of boring. He doesn't knock people out, but hit and not get hit is the name of the game, and he does it every time out. And I do hope that Nasruddin Imanov is able to. He's very explosive. He's very quick on the feet. He's serviceable in striking, but he is very good in scrambles and getting on top and stuff like that. He is. I hope he wins just because he is a breath of fresh air for a division that really does need some injection of something there. But sure, expectedly, it's probably going to be a Sean Strickland.
Yeah, that's the thing. A win for Imanov does more for the division, as you're kind of alluding to there. He's running a 3-fight win streak over some names, at least. Shabazian, Ian Heinisch, and Joaquin Buckley. What does a win for Sean Strickland do for the division aside from get him back? He's coming off the back of 2 losses, that Pereira knockout, obviously, and the Cannonier one right at the end of the year. What does a win for Sean Strickland do for the division?
Nothing. Oh, absolutely nothing. Nothing on that one.
If we just look down the rankings, Imanov's ranked number 12, Sean Strickland ranked number 7. Let's say Imanov wins, he probably switches, but then you maybe set up a fight with a Dricus du Plessis even, or a Derek Brunson, a Vittoria, a Cannonier. For Sean Strickland, he nowhere near Alex Pereira. Adesanya, Whitaker, obviously we saw him lose to Cannonier. Vittori probably beats him pretty handily. I mean, Strickland, Brunson, maybe. But again, it doesn't really do anything for the division. It doesn't, it's nothing for the division, unfortunately. A Sean Strickland win, like I say, aside from getting him back in the win column. But, as you were kind of alluding to, unfortunately, I think we might get a Sean Strickland victory.
If you're a betting guy, I don't think Nasruddin is a safe bet, although I can see him winning. It's just Sean Strickland has done his game against very good fighters, and not a lot of people can actually counter the game. It's very simplistic, it's very straightforward, but it just works. And this is what we were talking about back in the old era with BJ Penn dominated divisions just due to how strong a jab is. And that, you see that over and over again. It is the bread and butter of all combinations. It's the start of everything in boxing is the jab. If you master a jab, you can dominate divisions. And Sean Strickland doesn't have much else other than the jab. So back-to-back main events. I'm looking at the UFC is. Did Davison Figueiredo do it in UFC 255 and then UFC 256?
I'm sure. I don't.
Look it up. He did it. And on a numbered event as well.
Is there not? I would have figured that there would have been.
There was a Hermanson Victoria in between. And there's
two cards in between. Yeah, so
that sucks.
I mean,
that sucks. But you were right.
I mean, certainly impressive. You're still looking at the best part of 20 days in between.
20 days, yeah.
20 days, 21 days in between headlining fights. This is what I'm kind of alluding to. This is a tough feat, and it's fair play to Sean Strickland, because we all left that Jared Cannonier fight not knowing what happened. What was going on. I don't think we even talked about it on the show because it's just a nothing fight again at middleweight. There's such a gap in between the top 2 or 3 guys at middleweight and the entire rest of the division. So that's why we're kind of wanting Imanov to win, because it's, like you say, a breath of fresh air. And I think the only thing is with Sean Strickland headlining this event is that, no disrespect to any of the guys on there, but this fight card was poor.
Yeah.
Top to bottom is not great. And then you put Sean Strickland, a guy who will jab for 25 minutes in the main event. It's just like, the best fight for me is Umar Nurmagomedov versus Barcelos.
Barcelos just can't catch a break on these bookings, can he? He keeps getting these tough fights where he can't. I don't think the UFC likes Barcelos, even though he's quite talented.
What did he do to piss anybody off? We've got Priscilla Cachoeira versus Cesaro Eubanks. Charles Johnson makes his third UFC appearance now, I think. Yeah, because he was matched with Mo Markov, wasn't he?
Yeah.
That's maybe something to keep an eye on. But is he going to really make a run at flyweight? 32 1-1 in the UFC.
I know. Good, and like his wins and losses in the UFC are maybe not indicative of his talent, because he fought Zumagulov in a close win. Muhammad Makayev was another, like, a lot of good scrambles and getting up off the feet. But yeah, Jimmy Flick, I think Charles Johnson takes that fight. I hope that Charles Johnson can be a top 10 in his career. But like you said, like the clock is ticking kind of situation.
Exactly. And I think we could be looking at probably the number one contenders fight for the women's bantamweight title with Ketlen Vieira and Raquel Pennington. Vieira's 2-0 in her last two, having defeated Holly Holm and Miesha Tate, which, they're on paper, they're good wins, regardless of where these two ladies are at in their career, they're names. Raquel Pennington, I think, is on a 4-fight winning streak. Sorry, Marilyn Renault, Pani Clanzad, Macy Cheerson, and Aspen Ladd. Again, women's bantamweight is poor. Juliana Pena, I think the way that she was dominated in that second fight is nowhere near a title shot. Ketlen Vieira, she's a new face, I guess, to face. Amanda Nunes, Holly Holm, she matched with Yana Kunitskaya. Irina Aldana, I think, is still up there, and then Raquel Pennington. But let's throw back to the Raquel Pennington fight against Amanda Nunes the first time.
I know,
dominated. We need to be injecting fresh talent into each and every division.
It has been a while.
We're not at the moment.
It's been a while since, like, the apex time, not UFC apex. I mean the peak time of women's bantamweight. Like, there was a time when, like, Ronda Rousey, Miesha Tate, and Amanda Nunes were all actively competing in that division. You had the Olympic silver medalist Sarah McMahon was hanging around. Like, it was a really fun time, and now everyone got better, but Amanda Nunes has just clobbered the division to the point where it's so uninteresting. There is actual talent in the division, and there's cool people rising. But how about the new? Because speaking of a breath of fresh air needed for bantamweight, a breath of fresh air needed for middleweight, Tatiana Suarez is coming back in the strawweight division. 3 years away, neck injuries, which is flyweight. That's what I meant. Sorry, flyweight.
Yeah.
Woo, how exciting is this? This is Valentina Shevchenko's territory. Shevchenko's out there lying, saying that there's no contenders. Suarez might get one win and get a title shot. She's back.
I've got an article coming out. It'll probably come out again later today that I wrote yesterday. Valentina Shevchenko's worst nightmare's back.
Yes.
And she was, at the time, she was probably the strawweight division's worst nightmare. Now with that extra 10 pounds, she doesn't have to cook, because I remember seeing her on the scale. She's a big, muscular frame.
Yeah,
cutting down to 115. Now she's had all this time off, but she hasn't got. What I like is they haven't given her a gimme fight. Montella De La Rosa is a solid fighter, in my opinion. I think De La Rosa is good. Especially on the ground.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously we have questions of, like, is she still in her prime? 3 years away, injuries, like, what kind of shape are you coming back? But we have to imagine her in her prime, at her best. What does she look like? And Montella De La Rosa is still a tough fight for her.
For sure. And, let's hope that she still is in her prime, because, a finish in the first round against Alexa Grasso, a finish of future and former champion at the time, Carla Esparza, pretty dominant win over Nina Nunes.
Yep.
And now flawless she's matched up with Montella De La Rosa, who, just looking down her record, wins over Rachel Ostovich, Nadia Kassim, Maria Borello. She drew with Maria Brenner Silva and finished Ariane Lipski. Yes, she lost to Macy Barber, but that was, if you remember that fight, it was Macy Barber just pushing De La Rosa up against the fence for 15 minutes. Nothing, it never caught fire. It's a really good, I think, it's not a gimme fight, but it's a really good fight to get Suarez sort of back in the mix. I think a win over De La Rosa, maybe then a win over another top contender.
Mm-hmm.
I think she probably gets ranked with a win over De La Rosa, despite the fact that De La Rosa isn't ranked at the moment.
I think so.
And then she holds a win over the 5th ranked girl in the division.
yeah.
I think you match her up with someone. I think you maybe force this one through. You match her up with maybe a Caitlin Chikagian or a
like a Talia Santos, or someone who doesn't have a fight, but
yeah, exactly. I think Santos is matched with Erin Blanchfield, isn't she? In February or March time. Yeah.
Man, Shevchenko fans are weird, aren't they? Have you seen like this is like Shevchenko fans are delusional, because I've seen them posting of like, there's no one left in the division. How about another Amanda Nunes fight? We got it twice. They both were lame. there is actual people in the division.
I'm keen for another Amanda Nunes fight. I want an Amanda Nunes fight at 130 pounds.
Sure, whatever. That's fine.
Because Shevchenko isn't a 135er, and Amanda Nunes, I don't want to see her fight with one leg to make 125. She'd have to cut one of her limbs off to make that weight. But I also, I don't want to be that guy, but I kind of agree with Shevchenko fans that the division is, again, now looking quite stale. Manon Fiorot is the clear number 1 contender, but she's out with an injury, or she's at least rehabbing an injury that she recently had.
Mm-hmm.
She should be rematching Talia Santos, but clearly she didn't want to do that, because Santos would have taken that rematch in a second.
Of course.
But now Santos is having to fight down. She's having to fight. She's number 2. She's having to fight number 10, Erin Blanchfield. Not a bad thing, but it is what it is. Caitlin Chikagian, she's sort of the head of the Who Needs Her club. She's a really tough fight. A win over her probably gets you a title shot, but because she's such a tough fight, she's not a massive name, and you know for a fact that she's going to be a difficult fight on the night. Why would anyone take that? Lauren Murphy doesn't do anything for anyone in the division, unfortunately. The thing that I'm most excited for is Erin Blanchfield, Talia Santos, and Casey O'Neill facing Jennifer Maia. Casey O'Neill is the dangerous one. I've been high on her since, before, when I saw that she signed for the UFC, I've been high on her. And, again, alluding to my article coming out later this week of outlandish predictions, I think she'll get a title shot this year. I think she'll lose said title shot, but I think she'll get a title shot. Casey, the UFC want to promote Casey O'Neill. That's why they put her up against Roxanne Modafferi. Yeah. If she beats Jennifer Maia in London with a crowd behind her, she probably rocks the mic. She maybe gets a Caitlin Chikagian fight. She could beat Caitlin Chikagian and go on to face Shevchenko. This is not a deep division.
Well, it's not really, but just.
But we've got a lot of the thing is we've got a lot of girls, say, ranked 9 to 15. Andrea Lee, Erin Blanchfield, O'Neill, Macy Barber, Tracy Cortez, Cynthia Calvillo is what she is, Amanda Ribas. All of the if you just flip the division on its head and put everyone ranked sort of, say, 9 or 10 to 15 at 1 to 5, I think they all give, Tracy Cortez, good grappler, could give Shevchenko issues. Casey O'Neill, solid grappler, good stand-up, could really give Shevchenko issues. And then you've got Tatiana Suarez, who's not even in the division yet, officially, A
breath of fresh air. It's so nice.
Yeah, it's so good to get someone that is a phenomenal talent, has got the skill to challenge Shevchenko, and she's not even ranked yet.
I'm looking forward to it.
It's good.
I think one thing that rubs us the wrong way is the way Valentina Shevchenko fans talk about her makes me think that she is some like Anderson Silva-esque knockout machine, or like Chuck Liddell, just like constant Terminator stuff. And she's a lot closer to Sean Strickland. You know what I mean? Like, guys, she is talented. She is better than a lot of the people, almost everybody in that division. I get it. But man, you guys need to calm the hell down about her. Actually, before you said one thing there, like, can we talk about UFC London for a sec? What is going on with the main event here? We've heard Kamaru Usman is out on a hand injury. Kamaru Usman has already signed the paperwork. He's definitely in. No Kamaru Usman out. And Leon Edwards has said he wants Jorge Masvidal. He's requested that fight. What is the London main event going to be? This is so silly.
Luckily, we know one thing, that Leon Edwards is going to be headlining.
He's
UFC
on
London.
The card. Absolutely.
Pound for pound, headshot, dead.
Beautiful, man. That's so cool.
And
That's awesome, actually.
one thing we know is Leon Edwards headlining in London.
Yes.
We assume that the likes of Molly McCann will be on the card. We might even see Darren Till further down the card, but I don't know if we'll see Darren Till return. We've got an absolute banger announced already between
Nathaniel Wood.
Nathaniel Wood. I couldn't remember his name. I'm picturing the two guys, and Lerone Murphy. And
that is a good fight. That is a good fight.
I both love and absolutely hate the fight because I don't want to see either of those guys lose. But
I know
it is what it is, and Lerone Murphy put it perfectly online. You don't have to choose a side; just enjoy the violence.
Absolutely,
I'll enjoy the violence. Then I'm so in on this.
It is a good fight.
Just looking through the card now. On Tapology, the fights that have been announced, obviously, Lerone Murphy, Nathaniel Wood, Jai Herbert, Ludwig Klein. I think that's a great fight for Jai Herbert. As we alluded to earlier, Casey O'Neill, Jennifer Meyer. Jake Hadley returns to the UK for the first time, I think, since fighting for Cage Warriors against Malcolm Gordon in tough fight for Jake Hadley. Joanne Coldwood, or Wood, as we know, will refer to her. After seemingly retiring, she's returning to face Luana Carolina, who, bless her, is returning to the same arena that she was spinning back elbow knocked out by Molly McCann. But she's game to travel, and we've obviously got Roman Dolodzi versus Marvin Vettori. We know that Leon Edwards will be headlining because it's the homecoming for Leon Edwards. For me, the fight to make would be Bilal Muhammad.
I agree. I don't want Kamaru. I actually think take a little bit more time off. Just heal your hand, heal your head. No one wants to see Jorge Masvidal. And Bilal Muhammad would be great.
Kamaru Usman, unfortunately, he's going to go back to what almost won him the fight. He will lie on Leon Edwards for 25 minutes if he has to, bore the crowd, and he's not going to stand with Leon Edwards again. We don't know how much that knockout is going to both mentally and physically have affected Kamaru Usman. Will he slow down? This hand injury, we know that he's essentially got no knees. Kamaru Usman, he can't run on concrete because his knees are so knackered. We saw, I think he was at a sort of local promotion in Nigeria, and he was sort of obviously the big star there. And we saw him with the hand cast or the sort of hand brace thing.
Local promote, that was Bellator, man. No,
they probably got more viewers than Bellator. More fans, they do. But so he's clearly not hitting pads now. It's not long. We haven't got long. Tickets will come out at the end of January.
I know.
It's not looking good for Kamaru Usman. Colby Covington, I think, will be sitting out until this Jorge Masvidal stuff is sort of sorted, because he wants to claim as much money off Masvidal as he can and say, if he signs up for a fight and they say, he wants to sort of almost milk the injuries as best he can, which I'm not saying that he wasn't, but I don't, this is a guy who's a professional fighter.
Well, it's like when who was the one guy with the mullet who beat like Diego Sanchez a while back? Michael Chiesa. He was suing Conor McGregor for the bus incident, and he was saying like, I couldn't fight because of the damage that Conor did to me, and I think that's what Covington is doing. Exactly. Of like, I'm losing money because I can't fight because of what he did to me.
And for sure. And then Khamzat isn't making welterweight in 2025, let alone in March.
I could see the UFC booking that fight, though. You could see the UFC booking that fight, though.
Well, I'm not sure if they do. I think, for me, the fight to make is Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad. They've got the history. Bilal Muhammad really does know how to sell a fight. And also, to be honest, it's irrelevant whether they sell this fight or not. It's going to sell out in seconds.
Yep.
The pay-per-view, I don't think will do well regardless, because of the timing that it's going to be on. The timing that it'll be, I'd assume it'll be local time in the UK. So, 10 o'clock in the evening. So what's that? Mid-afternoon in the US.
Not bad, not great.
Yeah, not bad, not great. But Leon Edwards has to headline it. And you stack the card beneath Edwards. The worry for me is that they've already announced a big fight, Vettori versus Dolodzi, for the potential co-main event. For me, this is the first this is the first pay-per-view in the UK since we had Bisping Henderson back in 2016, 2017.
It's been a minute.
It's been a hot second. But, you need to put another big name on the card.
Do you think Paddy? I mean, Molly's going to be on the card. Paddy, what do you think of Paddy?
I think
controversial, but he's got nothing booked. He fought last month. This is going to be 4 months, 5 months.
I think Paddy probably gets on the card. Well, I don't know when Terrence McKinney's fighting again.
See, Terrence was one of the guys I thought. I think Terrence fights in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I believe that he also said that if he wins that, the UFC are going to look to either give him Paddy or a big name.
Terrence McKinney's going to learn that the UFC will tell you anything if you will sign the contract now.
Yeah, exactly. So McKinney is scheduled to fight. Oh, on the Brazilian card next.
Yeah, a couple of weeks from now. Next week? No.
Yeah, not this Saturday. The Saturday after.
Yeah,
the 21st.
Yeah.
If he wins, then which he's fighting an experienced guy in Ismail Bonfim. I can't lie, I have never seen him fight, but the guy is undefeated since 2014, where he lost to Renato Moicano. So it's not a gimme fight by any chance.
No, not at all.
But I can see them booking McKinney. However, if you bring the UFC to the UK and you put Paddy the Baddy on it, you don't give him a fight that he probably loses.
No, it's going to be another not top 15 fighter. I don't know. There's so many good fighters at lightweight that I don't know.
Drew Dober, Matt Frivola, these are guys that they keep Paddy far, far away from if they want to promote Paddy, because
Joe Dober would perform violence in I guess Paddy.
I don't know who does the Tapology rankings, but they've got Paddy the Baddy ranked number 20.
I think it's fans.
With Ismagulov ranked. I know he's retired now, but behind him.
Yeah. Tapology rankings do their best. They do their best to rank thousands of people, but
they're there for they serve a purpose. But realistically, Nasrat Haqparast, great fight for Paddy the Baddy, probably a step up in competition or around the same as Jared Gordon. That makes sense. You've got other guys, Diego Ferreira hasn't fought without a fight.
Diego Ferreira might actually be the one of I don't think he's in his prime anymore. I think he's
far from it. Yeah,
that might be the fight they book.
Logically, the fight for Paddy the Baddy, if we're not thinking about promoting him or anything, is Gregor Gillespie or a Dan Hooker or a Grant Dawson or a Drew Dober. All guys that are
Drew Dober's a good one.
Better than him on paper, but will get him that push, especially Gregor Gillespie. Gregor is a phenomenal wrestler. Where does Paddy perform his best? When he's on his back, when he's defending takedowns, or when he in the sort of jiu-jitsu realm, as it were. They give him someone that we've never heard of, I imagine, or someone that is riding a 3 or 4 fight losing streak.
No, there's no way they're giving him the Giga Chad, not Bobby Green, Drew Dober or someone like that.
I mean, even a Bobby Green fight for me would make sense. He's a trash talker, the same as Paddy. Yeah. I don't think there'd be any bad, but the fight for me is, I think I wrote an article this week, 5 fights to make in 2023. Sorry, 5 UFC fights to make. Ilia Topuria, he's a featherweight.
I know.
He's a featherweight. Yes, he's ranked number 9 at featherweight. He goes up to 155 pounds and schools Paddy the Baddy, in my opinion.
You know what I love is everyone talking about this fight, from Luke Thomas to Ariel, just being like, man, Ilia Topuria eats him alive. There's no doubt in anyone's mind the intensity he brings to fight. It's very hard. I think maybe what we're all getting at in the industry is that it's very hard to find a Paddy fight that he can win. He's going to have to lose in London almost. And
that's maybe why they don't book him in London. Because that's potentially why they don't book him in London. But I think going back to the original point, Leon Edwards is obviously going to be in the main event.
Yeah, Bilal's fine.
I think Bilal, Gilbert Burns obviously fighting Neil Magny, but he's still, he's coming off that's 1 win. Bilal is deserving of a title shot. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
for me, it's Leon versus either Kamaru Usman or Bilal Muhammad. I have a horrible feeling that they're going to go with Jorge Masvidal.
I know, me too. I think they will.
And the main reason that they'll go with Jorge Masvidal is because they can say, in this very building.
Yeah.
Who gives a fuck? He's, for want of a better word, Jorge Masvidal at this moment in his career is shit. I'm just looking.
I know.
Just looking down the. Give it to Shav. If you're going to give it to Masvidal, give it to Shavkat. If you're gonna give it to Masvidal, give it to fucking Kelvin Gastelum. You know, I mean, we're at a
This
point now
guy,
where
yeah, go
we
on.
don't need to see Jorge Masvidal in a title shot. We know he's not elite. We know he's not in a title, position. We know that he sells tickets, yes, but we also know that we don't need a ticket seller for London because it will sell out. I'm pretty sure it sold out in July before we even got a headliner announced. Before it was
Oh yeah,
Curtis Blades versus Aspinall.
yeah.
Coming from a UK fan perspective, these tickets will sell regardless of who's on the card. You could have a quote unquote nobody fight. A couple of years ago we had no English people in the main event. We had Volkov versus Verdum. Don't get me wrong, two big names, especially for Fabricio Verdum. We don't see the UFC on these shores very often. We saw it twice last year, and that was the first time it's been in the UK twice for, I think, 4 or 5 years. Even might have even been 7 years when they went to Liverpool and did a London show in March. We don't get, we got PFL in August, and I think we got a Bellator card in May last year. We don't get, elite mixed martial arts. Cage Warriors is always on, and you can always go and watch a Cage Warriors show, and it's always going to be put on a good show. There are local promotions, but you don't get the UFC coming to the UK, very often. It will sell out. You could do Leon Edwards versus number 13 Michael Chiesa, who hasn't got a win in a couple of, and regardless, it will sell. You don't need to put him in against Jorge Masvidal because Masvidal's a ticket seller. He's riding a 3-fight loss streak, and you can understand why Leon Edwards is thinking, he wants to get his revenge on Jorge Masvidal. He knows he's elite in comparison to Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah.
But if I'm Edwards, I call out Bilal Muhammad because I was schooling Bilal Muhammad in the first 5 minutes of the fight that we had. And then I did the unfortunate eye poke and fuck, that was a bad one. But,
Yeah.
Call out Bilal Muhammad. Say, if Usman's not ready, I want to fight Usman because I want to prove that I'm better than him. We're 1-1. I want the trilogy. If Usman's not going to be ready, I'll fight Bilal and then I'll fight Usman again. August, September, October time. For me,
storyline's there. I want to settle the score against Bilal. It's a cool story.
I want to prove that I'm the better guy. I want to prove that I'm not dodging him. Of course, I didn't sign up for the rematch because I got the fight against Usman, and look what happened there. Now, I'm being the bigger man. I know that I'm better than Bilal, but I'm giving Bilal the chance. The storylines there against Jorge Masvidal, but no one cares about watching Jorge Masvidal get schooled again for 25 minutes. We've seen it now. We saw him get schooled for 25 minutes against Usman. We then saw him get absolutely knocked into the shadow arm against Usman. Then we saw him get dominated against Colby Covington. The aura around Jorge Masvidal for me is gone.
That ship has sailed. That ship has absolutely
I want to see Jorge Masvidal versus, I don't care who. I want to see him against Nick Diaz. These are Nick and Nate Diaz, a Tony Ferguson kind of realm. These are, I don't want to say legend fights because they're not in that division yet. They're sort of I don't want to say has-been fights, but you know what I mean. The pay-per-view stars that are nowhere near a Conor McGregor fight would make sense. McGregor's nowhere near a title shot.
Yeah, it would make sense.
But it is what it is. None of these guys are anywhere near a title shot, but they're still big names in the sport. Let's not try and shoehorn Jorge Masvidal in because he punched someone in the face backstage. Because if that's the case, the next event that I go to, I'm going to just hit a random fire and see if I can get a pay-per-view main event.
Get a booking. Yeah. There's something very draining about talking about Jorge Masvidal, of just like everything from the defensive fight style to then he had 3 good fights and that has made him a mega star in the sport. But yeah, it's just exhausting a little bit. But good for him as Tequila brand is doing well and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, he's one company I was working with, I don't work with anymore, but they were saying like essentially all we want you to do stuff on is the big names of the sport. Like if it's not Conor and Jorge Masvidal, don't do it. Okay, I quit. That sucks. I'm not doing it. It's exhausting to talk about. There hasn't been anything happening with those people for a long time, and
it's all these sites that Conor McGregor posted another picture where he looks huge. Yeah, because he's juiced out of he had literally admitted to juicing out of his head. Of course, he looks huge. He's like, I got an exemption to take Adam. Yeah, you got an exemption, but you've also put on about 30 kilos of muscle. I don't think the exemption is purely for the healing of your broken leg, mate. Like, come on.
Man, we've talked about that one.
Exactly.
It's not a good look. Anyway, so one championship this Friday. They do have a very
Yeah,
good
good
main event.
fight.
Superbon
Good card.
and Shingiz Alazov. Honestly, this is a great kickboxing. I think these two guys are probably playing for a spot on an all-time great list. And this one, like One Championship, is one of those companies who has always promoted their MMA stars as like they're greats, they're champions, and they weren't fooling anyone. But their kickboxing stars like Superbon genuinely are making out here, making history. It is a great fight. Rod Tang is on it. He's switching to kickboxing for a bit, trying to pick up a title there. Stamp Fairtex is on it, fighting Anis Mexen, a former Glory champion. There's some other good stuff on the card as well. But yeah, like if you just look at their Muay Thai and MMA, chef's kiss on that stuff. It is good.
Yeah. You know, we got Gary Turner versus Johnny Nunes, two
not bad
notable names.
By the way,
check out your interview. Yeah.
Hey, I didn't realize until I was researching this. Maybe I'm wrong, but do you remember how Misha Tate broke up with Brian Caraway to date some guy in the gym? That some guy is Johnny Nunes.
Johnny Nunes, and now they've got multiple kids together. It's the love story we didn't know we needed, but it's the love story we've got.
I was surprised when I was researching. I was like, oh man, that's Misha Tate's guy.
Exactly, because she was involved with One Championship for a bit, wasn't she?
She was VP, just like Rich Franklin was VP of something. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, so you know, if you can, I don't quite know. Is this on Prime? I'm not sure how you get Prime. It in the UK.
I think it's a pay-per-view or YouTube. Yeah. But either way, I think we get it the next day for free.
Exactly. So yeah, if you can stay off social media on Friday night, be sure to check out the card, because it is, you know, even if you're not highly invested in the guys fighting in the, I think that's sometimes what I struggle with One Championship, is I'm not too invested in these guys, but they're always great fights. They're always exciting. You know, Gary Turner and Johnny Nunes. You know, Rod Tang, Stan Fairtex, you got Superlek, you got Superbon, you know, these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just fun fun fights, and more than likely going to be fun knockouts. So, absolutely. You know, be sure to check it. You know, I don't want to say it, but check the UFC card out, I guess. We'll talk about it next week. It's mostly going to be reviewing One Championship and looking forward to UFC 283, I think. 284.
This one's at the Apex. This UFC event's at the Apex, isn't it?
Exactly. So, you know, just be sure to check out. There's no boxing on this week, so it's 283, UFC 283 from Brazil. You know, the Teixeira Hill, and really, the 14th fight between Figgy and Moreno. So, you know, we'll definitely break that down, because that is a card where, unlike this weekend, from top to bottom, there are fights that you want to be keeping an eye on. So, be sure to tune in next week. But if you miss the UFC this week, I wouldn't lose sleep over it.
Thanks so much for your time, Frazer Krohn. Links will be down below for all of the articles discussed. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.